My mother's earlier sisters wove, and there was and she's told me about the old farmhouse. I've got a picture of it. They had a loom, and I think it was in the kitchen. Evidently, the outside of the house doesn't. Of course, I was there when I was younger, but I can't remember. But the kitchen evidently was pretty good size because they had a huge table in there. Because a lot of people that would come in on the train and need someplace to stay. In those days, country people took you in. I mean, it didn't matter who you were because we could trust people in more than we can. But for instance, traveling men would come and they would stay all night. Well, of course, they and eat. They never knew who was going to be there for a meal, And so they had this huge table that she told me about. And one of my cousins said in the table was a drawer, and that's where grandmother kept all of her goodies, like honey and and then she'd feed the grandchildren bread and jelly and that sort of thing. And then they had this big loom in this room, and my older aunts had all wove. Because at that time, now what he had in the store, I don't know, but there was no yardage goods or say rugs or anything like that that came later. And they made their own coverlets, their own blankets, and another thing they made, and she's told me about it, was rag rugs. They made it in strips and sewed it together and put it down as a wall-to-wall carpet. And underneath of it they put straw. Then in the spring they'd take up that carpet and put fresh straw down and wash the carpet, sew it back together, and put it down. Now, don't you believe that'd be a job?
Yeah.
But so they it was necessary for them to weave. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So you actually got your start weaving with the Homestead Project?
Yeah.
And talk about
Yes,
how
that was in 36 or 37. When
and how did that come about?
Well, of course, when the homestead was started, the idea was to survive without a whole lot of help, And so what they did, they planned to have homes built, and each person was to have around 2 acres, so he could raise the most of his food and be able to take care of himself. Okay, besides that, they brought in people that would help them. For instance, they had a home economist, and they had people who taught them how to farm or how to plant. You'd be surprised how many people didn't know these things. And by the help of a Quaker, he was a Quaker. I don't know how he come to be here, but he was here. Bob Wilson was here as a Quaker, and the Quakers helped a lot. Well, the Quakers were the ones that helped bring in the thread. Now, somehow or other, I wish I had a better history of this, but I don't. But it seemed as though the federal administration furnished the looms, and then Bob, and through the Quakers, was able to bring in other supplies and thread. Tigris Valley Homestead started. I was working for WPA in the nursery school, and when they started the homestead, of course, the nursery was one of the things they wanted. And because I was already in the business, they talked me into coming down here and starting their nursery school. And that's when I talked. He was at work. Wilson Lumber Company had been down for. Well, that's why the homestead was here, because the lumber had been cut out and the mines had gone dry.
Mm.
And so that's why the Roosevelts
Uh-huh.
had the idea of the homestead. But that's, then is when I learned to weave.
Mhm.
And that was 1937, I believe. 1936 or 7, around there someplace. And I wove with them.
Now, who was teaching that?
Well, there again, there were people that were brought in.
Mhm.
See, what they did, they brought in people to help.
Mhm.
They brought the home economists in to teach people how to keep house. There was one woman, let me tell you this one, it'll make me give you an idea. She was mopping her kitchen, and in the middle it was beautiful, but there was about that much dirt up against the She didn't know any better, you know, so she was just a young woman. Anyway, they brought these people in. They were brought in. They brought these weavers in. They were from Scandinavian country. I had the best weavers, teachers, and that there were available.
Mhm.
They brought them.
So, did they start the weaving program as a way to help people maybe start a cottage industry? Was it for?
No, I don't think they had an idea. Now they might have. I don't know.
Was it to help people make money, or just to help people?
No, they wanted you to help survive.
Survive,
To
yeah.
help yourself.
Yeah.
And I was going to tell you about the first program. And I wasn't interested in this, see, now, because I was over at the nursery school. And this man and woman, and I have no idea how much they knew about weaving, but they were homesteaders,
Mhm.
and they started it. And the first program was an NYA program.
Mhm.
And these young people were, the age that they took for that was after they finished high school, and until I think about, I'd be probably 16 to 20 or something. Anyway, or no, you could be older. Even young married women that had moved into the homestead were eligible to go. Anyway, they were on this NYA program, and we had a lot of visitors, an awful lot of visitors. And so they figured that maybe they had a little weaving shop. There's been a weaving shop ever since it started. And then they would try to make things and sell them, like cushions, or
Mhm.
I can show you one of the cushions I have that they made. And I think I have a couple of scarves. And then they would sell it, and that was their money.
Mhm.
They could have that. Another thing they did, they raised plants, flowers, and things like that. But the idea was they were helping you. They were bringing people in to help
Mhm.
you,
Mhm.
helping you different ways.
So they had home economics people, and they had weavers. Did they have anything specifically for the men? Did they have a woodworking project or anything?
I think that there probably was
Mhm.
already someone in the homestead that could do
Mhm.
that, because there were people, homesteaders, that
Mhm.
they had a woodworking shop. They made tables, and they made different furnitures. Another thing they did, they shipped furniture in here. A lot of people didn't have any furniture,
Mhm.
and so they shipped furniture.
Would this be
Yeah.
used?
And then so they would sell it to them at cheaper prices they
Was
could.
that used furniture or new furniture?
No, it was new furniture.
Mhm.
No.
Mhm.
And I think, I'm not sure about we bought a washing machine from them, our first washing machine.
Mhm.
Washer was from the homestead. And,
So was this the house that you came to?
uh-huh.
And these
Which-
houses were built about in the middle 30s, did you say?
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Good. I think the program started in the 30s, but I think maybe they a lot of we weren't able to move down when they first went to work here, and we still have a place to live in Mill Creek. And at that time, of course, I had the nursery up there too because we didn't have a place for nursery school. So we hired or rented a house and moved and had the nursery up. Oh, I spent a couple of years before, because at first there were very few houses built. The first ones were built across over in East Daly, as they call it. You go turn off at Daly and go across the river. And then they had some work for the men. They had, of course, most of the work was building houses, but they had a rock quarry up the road a piece, and there were men that had to work in the rock quarry. And that was one place. Then they had a farm. See, all this land that they bought a farm. I mean, they had a farm, a big farm over in east, on the east here. And that's when then the men were working, raising potatoes and and things like that. And then later, of course, they had to built the roads in.
How were decisions made about?
Oh, they had administration.
It was all administered by. There wasn't a vote taken by the community on things.
Well, now they had a co-op later, but of course, the first thing to do was to get somebody. People, it's just like any corporation. You've got to have a head.
Yeah.
And so they had an administrator, and of course there were people that were helping them in Washington, and then the local people had a lot to do with it. You have to have the backing.
Yeah.
You just can't come in and say we're going to build some houses. Yeah. They had all kinds of architects and several people. And
when people came here to live, what kind of agreement or whatever did they have to make with the administration of the project?
What?
Did they have to make some kind of an agreement with the administration of the project?
Oh, you were chosen.
You were chosen.
Uh-huh.
So there was
they had people that were trained that interviewed you, and
I see.
then you got how you do with any job, really, I have to guess. But Dad didn't want to do it. He was a lot of those people were proud, and they didn't want to take. They thought it was charity.
Yeah.
And they didn't want to do it. But I think probably the biggest thing that brought us down here was me about being
involved,
messed up with a nurse. Well, I finally talked him into it. But then everything that he did was right down his alley because he was a carpenter, and that's what he did here. And then when they finally, where they got to the point they had to have some kind of a industry, then that's when the mill down here was built. And then, of course, that was another place that he was very familiar with, was the runnings of a mill. And he was happy here, as far as that's concerned, but it was just a change, I think.
Yeah. Now, when these folks came in to set up a weaving project and teaching situation, did they use any local weavers at all for any
I don't think there were any.
construction. They didn't even.
I don't think there were any. There are always, and it even today, I'll hear of somebody new that I haven't heard of before that had a loom that somebody in their family
Yeah.
gave them.
Yeah.
A woman from Valley Head the other day. I get calls all the time
Yeah.
from people because I got I got a name, I guess, and so the first thing I think of weavings, me. Anyway, but I'm sure there were people. Now, one of the looms we borrowed was a homesteader, and she made carpet,
Mm-hmm.
and her loom was an automatic. It was noisy, but it was a loom. And then how we come to really get more mixed up in the see when the war came, then they forgot about us.
Yeah.
All they could think of was
War effort. Yeah.
fighting the war. And another thing, we couldn't even buy thread.
Mhm.
Thread went off the market, and decent thread has never come back, to my knowledge. Anyway, that's when they closed down the weaving shop.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, the looms were still there in this building, and we still continued to live here. Of course, at that time, we were mostly financially pretty well on our own by 40.
Where was the weaving shop located?
It's still down there. I've threatened to take a picture of it every time I go up and down the road, but I never can think of it. It's right below the filling station. This big building is a trade center. That was built.
Up at Daly?
Daily.
Okay, okay.
The trade center was built for, we didn't have any place for meetings and things like that.
Uh-huh.
And then on the other side of the trade center is a filling station.
Yeah.
Now that was built so they would have a job for men and that we could get our gas. And on the other side of the filling station is this little shop. Now when after the war, when they sold houses, they lost interest in the whole thing, And after the war was over, they wanted to sell the houses. Well, the idea was to eventually sell them to us anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But then they came here and talked to us and said what they would do, they would have us buy them. Now, one of the things we had already partly, I think Dad had about $500 or $600, or maybe more than that. And in those days, that was a good bit of money. Mm-hmm. And he already had on his house paid on.
Uh-huh.
Because the deal was that the men would work and they would get so much to live on. I think it was 7, I don't know. I can't remember numbers. Anyway, it's in one of those writings. So much to live on, and the other is sort of half and half. The other half was could be paid on, they called it the credit hours.
Mm-hmm.
And those credit hours went on your payment of your
Uh-huh.
house. And another thing, if you had a relative living with you, or you had a son that was old enough to work, and they didn't hire girls in, they could work, and with the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
You got so much, and the rest of it went on your dad's credit hours.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see, you build up, we
Yeah.
get a good bit on errors. And that's when they sold us the weaving shop.
Mm-hmm.
And now they offered
Now, when you
us,
say us,
well, weavers.
just,
There were only 5 or 6 of us that were
Mhm.
interested.
uh,
After the war, we went down there and wove some. because I could help them, and so we went back to weaving.
Mm.
But they offered this shop to this group of women for $500. It had 5 or 6 looms in there, and all the equipment. If you ever went in the weaving room, you know how much equipment is necessary.
Tell me about the CC camp.
It was just like the Army,
What was?
the camp, the CC camp. Only you were under the government jurisdiction, just like being in the Army when you were in camp. But when you weren't in camp, you was working for the Forest Service. You had inspection, you had barracks, you had mess hall, just like regular Army. You was under the Army then. Yeah, had inspection. Didn't have any gun though.
Where was the camp located?
Near as I can tell you, if you ever heard it called Bear Heaven, you ever hear that? That's, the road going to Pickens. Well, the road's still there. You can see where some of the camps sit. They might have some stuff. Maybe looks to me like there's some rock. Last time I was by there, you know where Don Bosco School is, or whatever you call it there. Well, there's a road goes up to the right there, and it comes out on the Pickens Road. So we built half of it, and Camp Hutton had a CC camp there. They built the other half going up.
Now, what tools did you have to work with? What was it like trying to build a road in those days?
Well, some of it was pick and shovel, and you had to nap a stone. You had to haul a stone in. And you had to nap that stone up pretty fine, breaking it up with a sledgehammer. I drove a truck for the Forest Service.
And how long were you in, and what did you accomplish in the time you were there?
I was in there about probably 18 months, I think it was. I learned a few things, I guess. We had a pretty good camp commander, Lieutenant Barton, Captain Barton. Yeah. I had a doctor, had an ambulance. You didn't make very much. You got $30 a month. That $30 went home.
What do you mean?
You sent that $25 of it home. If you was making $30 a month. You only had $5 left.
And who got the other 25?
Well, your parents at home, they got it. Take care of them. Back in them days, it was hard to get along.
What do you mean?
Well, I got it. Work wasn't too plentiful.
This was in...
I think it was 34. 34, part of 35. If you got to driving the truck, you'd make extra $5. That'd give you, that was $6. That'd give you $36 a month. And then if you got lucky enough to drive the Army truck or ambulance, you got 45.
What other tools were on the job? Picks and shovels, and did you have scoops or?
No. Or where you had cutoffs, and where the water would go down and then go across the road, you had to dig those by hand, pick and shovel. You didn't have any equipment. You had a trail builder, that's all.
Trail builder is...
Like a small dozer.
So it was after that then that you went to work at the homestead?
Yeah.